I'm David Patton, Codes Administrator for the City of Harrisburg. We've had a very productive year this year, and that's in large part due to the Mayor and City Council opening up additional positions of Codes Enforcement Officer and recognize the need to have strengthened code enforcement activity and presence in our city neighborhoods. And in doing so, we decided to establish the zones for each Codes Officer, and each of them are two-man zones. With that, the codes officers get a chance to work with community in those particular zones, as well as get established in the presence of the neighborhood and get familiar with the geography of their particular area. In that area of operation, they have two charges. One is to address a lot of the quality of life issues. The secondly is to address a lot of the building permit issues. Building permits are something that need to be done. They're required by state law. A lot of people don't recognize that. But the building permits, the inspections of the building permit activity, porches and rehabs and so on, they are mandatory and required by state law, and they help support the property maintenance activities throughout the city. So with that, we've established these particular zones, and I'll go over a little bit about where the zones are located so everybody knows who's assigned to their particular zones, and a little bit of how we've established the boundaries of these zones. Going into Zone 1. Zone 1 is here. It's actually McClay Street going south. Everything is split between Cameron Street, east and west, and that's established that particular boundary with our housing court. So one district justice here's one side, and then one district justice here's the other side. But Zone 1 is McClay Street going south on the west side of Cameron Street, and that stretches the whole way down into the Shipoke area. Zone 2 is McClay Street going north. We have certain areas that are more challenging than others, so a lot of the areas up in here are less of a need for codes enforcement activity as much as they are in the uptown area around the 20 to 2300 block. Going into Zone 3. Zone 3 is north of Market Street. And north of Market Street, you're going into 18th, 17th, in different areas throughout that particular zone. And the same as with the other zones, they're dealing with the code enforcement activities, the rental inspections, as well as the permit inspections. Zone 4 is the Allison Hill area. Zone 5 is north of 17th Street and then stretches south into Cameron Street. And just a little bit about how some of these zones are established. Some of them are based on needs and based on the complaints that we receive. As I indicated before, especially in Zone 2, there's not a lot of activity going up in this particular area. So basically the concentration of zone enforcement activities are going to go on around this particular area here north of Cameron. As far as the Zone 1, there's not a whole lot of activity as we get down through the Shipoke area. In addition to that, we have a lot of commercial properties that a lot of the property maintenance issues won't come to light. As far as in Zone 3, okay, again, up in here, this is outside the city. But some of this particular area here, there's public housing. Now, public housing is under the jurisdiction of the federal government, so we have no jurisdiction under those particular buildings. And that's the same with up in some of the north in Zone 2 area too. There's a lot of Harrisburg Housing Authority properties that are scattered about, part of their scattered sites that we have no enforcement power over. However, they are very cooperative when we do send stuff to them indicating they need to address certain lots or certain buildings and that sort of thing. In Zone 4, okay, the Allison Hill area, that's a very challenging area. It's a very concentrated area, but it's an area that's turning around. There's a lot of activity going on in this area with a lot of new construction. There's been an extensive amount of demolition activity being done here as well. But there's still a large concentration of rental properties, and with that, they need to be addressed as quickly as we can. As we get into Zone 5, we have a lot of areas that are more concentrated than others, and it's based a lot of times on density. In addition to that, there's also public housing that, of course, is under the jurisdiction of the Harrisburg Housing Authority. So with that, having these different zones, it increases our presence. It gets the inspector familiar with their geography and how to conduct themselves, and work with some of the community leaders, throughout each of the particular areas. Now, what I'd like to do is introduce some of the codes officers, each codes officer that is assigned to this particular area. In addition to that, we do have a commercial inspector that deals with a lot of the commercial properties throughout the area. And that was a position that was established through the mayor's permission. So so that we can address a lot of these commercial, whether it be vacant or whether it be occupied commercial properties. In Zone 1, assigned to Zone 1, which is Maclay Street South, we have Supay Choop, who also goes by the nickname of Soup, and William Garber. They're both charged with all the activities that go on throughout the Midtown and down to throughout the Shipoke area. In Zone 2, Joseph Farrell and Colton Weichman. Mr. Farrell couldn't be here today. He was on leave, but both of those gentlemen are in charge of the areas of Maclay Street North. Zone 3, which is north of Market Street on the east side of Cameron Street. The code enforcement officers assigned to that area are Reginald Hunter and Mick Urovic. Okay, in Zone 4, the code enforcement officers assigned to that area are Bruce Henry and Daryl Ristagno. They're responsible for that area south of Market, bounded by 17th Street. Okay, in Zone 5, have Matt McKinley and Neil Strausser. They're responsible for the area that's south of Market Street, that stretches down into the east end of South Cameron Street. Okay, and this is Officer Christopher Geltz, and he's the commercial codes inspector, and as I mentioned, he's responsible for all the commercial properties throughout the city, which you can imagine is a challenging job, but it deals with a lot of the vacant properties as well as the occupied commercial properties. Whenever we have a specific complaint or there's a change of use, Mr. Geltz inspects those just to make sure the public is safe as far as egresses or for sprinkler systems or what have you, just to make sure that everything is in compliance for the general public. This is Ann Montgomery. She's the Deputy Codes Administrator, and she deals with a lot of things pretty much throughout the city. There is no boundaries. I mean, she deals with all the particular plan reviews, a large part of the inspections and the reviews, a lot of the coordination, a lot of the meetings between developers, future development throughout the city, and is my second in command in dealing with a lot of the challenges and charges, within the Bureau of Codes. Also part of our staff is Nelva Wright. She's the city's health officer. Her challenges and charges throughout the city are inspecting all the food service establishments throughout the city, as well as all the food trucks, the vendors, anything that goes on with the city where somebody's dispensing food. Nelva's in charge of inspecting them to make sure they're compliant with all the state Department of Agriculture codes. In addition to that, she deals with a lot of the issues on occasion for when a child has been admitted to the hospital that has lead paint exposures. With that, then she conducts the enforcement mechanisms to try and force the property owner to do what's necessary so that that child can go back into a safer environment. I'm pleased to introduce to everyone the staff of the City of Harrisburg Bureau of Codes. Our most primary and singular goal is to increase the quality of life in city neighborhoods.